Foolish minds try to define what it is, but you and I don't speak a line to realize it. Lost in my words, all in my head, it hurts. But you have learned to read my eyes before I burn. Couldn't explain you if I tried. Too busy loving all the things you hide. I know love is sudden, but you were more than a surprise. Never felt so fine, say in your mind. Hey. Thank you. A musician has just as many tools to tell a story as does any other artist, a painter or filmmaker or an author. There is an audible way to tell these stories, and it's usually done without people noticing, even as it's being done right in front of their eyes, or their ears, for that matter. My name is Eli Pafumi, and I am a songwriter. It's what I consider myself most within the platform of music. I sing my songs, and I play my guitar in front of crowds to entertain, but ultimately what I hope to achieve with my music is to tell stories. That is the quintessence of what being a songwriter is all about. This past year, I had the ability to write my first full score to a concert play written by my mother, Helen Murray, who is a professional playwright and the artistic director of the Hub Theater in Fairfax, Virginia. We joined forces to create the Magi, a concert play about a band couple that's been on tour for 8 years, and now the band and the couple are on the verge of breaking up. The show reads like a live performance at a bar, so it was my job to write a full set's worth of music that the band would play, just like I would perform if I were playing a show at a local tavern. So as a lover of film scores and movie composers, I saw this as my first opportunity to write music that would accompany a storyline and underscore pivotal moments just like movie music does for the scores, for the films that they are paired with. As I've grown up, I've become incredibly intrigued by the ways film production has become reliant on composers to tell larger and larger aspects of a film's emotional narrative. From the listener's perspective, it's easy to point to the overt examples because when you hear something happy, you feel happy. And the same goes for any mood of music and the corresponding reaction to these tunes. The more I've looked into the way composers move their audiences through a full course of emotions, I've realized there is an almost mathematic precision to these choices. Numbers and music theory are being used to sway your perspectives. It's being done to you all the time, and I too found myself using certain musical concepts to bring the audience on an oral journey throughout the Magi. Now, these concepts are not new or profound, and plenty of composition majors in universities and conservatories across the world have studied this type of composing. But despite the fact that music is used in this way so often, many people are being taken on emotional journeys that they don't necessarily know that they are on. It's my goal now to allow people who may not know anything about the intricacies of music theory and how music works to develop a base understanding of how musicians are using their craft to manipulate the emotions of and tell stories to us listeners. So we'll start with cadences. Cadences are what complete musical phrases. Think of them like the end of a sentence. The end of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, for example, ends with what is called an authentic cadence, meaning the song resolves back to the one chord or the key that the song was written in. When you hear, "Now I wonder what you are," everything about the end of the song feels complete. It is almost like the tune is saying to you, "And they lived happily ever after." Composers use cadences like this in movies and television, plays, and live performances to give listeners a sense of completion and satisfaction, one that their ears won't question and they don't have to work very hard to understand. Adversely, there are types of cadences like those which are called deceptive cadences, half cadences, and plagal cadences, which don't always sound as complete. With these cadences, the songs resolve in a place that the ear does not anticipate. It leaves us at a completely different emotional level. Composers can use deceptive cadences in movie scenes in order to make you feel confused or uncomfortable. And I, too, found myself using these methods when writing my score for the Magi. So within these cadences, or the punctual endings to these sentences of music, there is some intricate detail going on. In order to fully understand how cadences work, we have to look at the letters that make up this sentence. So the musical alphabet goes from A to G, and within that there are what are called sharps and flats. You may have heard of those before. There are also key signatures, which basically outline the notes and the chords that are in a given song. Major keys tend to sound happier, and minor keys are usually sadder. And there is this never-ending array of musical sounds, textures, chords, and notes that composers employ to embellish their narratives and to serve an emotional purpose. So back now to the Magi. The first song of the show is a song entitled Foolish Minds, which I just played an excerpt of at the beginning of this talk. The song has this peppy, upbeat tempo, like the type of tune a musician would use to begin a performance. Despite this charismatic, bouncy melody, I had to find a way to let the song reflect the show's first scene, wherein the two characters, Nix and Jude, we find are in the middle of an argument that started before the show began. I used this whole toying with the emotional end of the sentence or the music in order to tell in order to foreshadow the emotional argument that was to come. Like the cadence, it seems ordinary, but there was more going on. So, within Foolish Minds, the song is written in the key of E major. So, in the final lines of the melody, I wrote it to end not on an E chord, or the one chord where the song starts, but rather an A chord, which is the fourth of that scale, E, F, G, and then A. Your ear naturally wants to pull back to the key that the song was in. I'm pulling out the rug a little bit by ending in a different direction, and therefore your ears are slightly uneasy with the song's lack of finality. I toyed with this emotional ending in order to truly set up what was to come. Within that, there's plenty other things that went in order to make sure this argument felt like it started the show, but also foreshadowed the fight that was to come. On a different note, with the last song of the show, I wrote The Leap, which is the name of the song, and it ended in similar to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, an authentic cadence, meaning the song resolves back to the one chord in the key that it was written, and therefore we feel like the song has a sense of finality and completion, and it feels absolute. And I made sure to do this because I wanted the song and the show to feel final and have this consistent undercurrent of hope. Because despite the conflict between Nix and Jude, like the songs, they too were able to resolve peacefully. Now, I am very proud and love the 9 songs that I wrote for the Magi, but perhaps my best storytelling as a songwriter was in the first and final songs of the show. Cadences were not the only tools I used to highlight the narrative. Additionally, I used key signatures, which provided an invisible sense of security and familiarity to the show's final moments. Foolish Minds and The Leap are both written in the key of E major and use the same, to some extent, the same chords. So the first notes we hear at the beginning of the show are also mirrored and repeated in the end of the plot. Parenthetically, I kind of restructured the chords within The Leap, adding some extra notes to give them a sense of openness and power that the chords in Foolish Minds didn't have. So rather than a plain A major chord, I gave it some depth, added a few notes, and changed it into this weird thing called an A minor 7 flat 13. Sounds nice. So by starting and ending the show in the same key, I was able to show that despite the conflict between these two characters, there was a constant in their love that never really disappeared. I've always thought of E major as being a very assertive, powerful key, so I manipulated the tools that this key gave me in order to create two vastly different songs at two very different moments in the show that had a similar undercurrent of hope. Now, there is a myriad of music theory terms I could talk about. I'm obsessed with the way that the mechanics and the sound of music, the mechanics of sound change music, so to speak. Within the Magi alone, I was able to employ these techniques in what I believe were intentional and purposeful ways. So it is my belief that ordinary people, even those with no understanding about the complexities of music, develop some understanding about the power a musician wields to shift and sway the perspectives of listeners. Like I said, first and foremost, I am a songwriter, and I easily get wrapped up in the verbiage of my lyrics. Writing words to my music is one of my favorite things to do, but the more I explore with instrumentation, the more I realize how emotions can be conveyed in a figurative way. It wasn't necessarily my lyrics in Foolish Minds that allowed the song to have this abrupt ending. I was able to mess around with this variety of musical concepts in order to construct a completely different emotion. Whether it be intentional or purposeful, the music reflected the show's narrative. And composers are constantly finding new and creative ways to distort and shape plain, almost mathematic concepts into what are beautiful works of art that tell stories on their own, using boring logistics to feed creativity. Now, the more cognizant we are of these intentional decisions, the more we will be able to enjoy and understand the myriad of reasons we feel something greater than ourselves when we are immersed in great art. Now, as I end the speaking portion of my talk, I want to ask of you one thing. Try to listen more. When you're watching a movie, be on the lookout for how composers like John Williams and Michael Giacchino, my favorite movie composers, are manipulating melodies and musical textures to tell stories and accompany the narratives of their films. Be attentive at live shows and watch how performers are strategically placing certain moments in their performances to tell a dynamic story. I recently had a choral instructor tell me that the biggest advantage a choir can have is the ability to listen, and to listen well. I think that the more time we spend understanding how and why music works the way it does, the more valuable and essential it will become. Therefore, I think everyone can benefit from taking the time to listen, make music, and tell stories together. So, as I conclude this talk, I will finish off with an excerpt from The Leap. Thank you. Fear is the one who runs backwards when there's two paths up ahead. And you were the fork in the road that made me lose feeling in my legs. This map only has one route, but all these signs don't seem to agree. There's sometimes in a path to take that hasn't already been decided for me. So let's meet in the middle of nervous and eager and agree this is terrifying. 'Cause sometimes falling in love just ain't up to us. So to hell with it, let's be petrified together. You're leaving me helpless. Oh, I'm shaking in my boots. This is getting reckless. Oh, the more we know, the more we stand to lose. I never asked to dig this deep. Never thought love meant you and me. And together ain't our guarantee. So let's take the leap. Thank you.